Alright, today we're going to be talking about your shoulder, the anatomy of it, and some injuries that can occur. So your shoulder is where your upper arm, which is called your humerus, meets your shoulder blade, which is called your scapula. Now I've constructed this diagram. So this ball and marker represents the humerus. And the humerus this is the main part of the bone. Your elbow would be on this end, down here. Then this is the top end of the humerus, which is actually a ball, like I've got in here. And then there's this hole in your scapula or shoulder blade that I've represented by this cup, and the ball in your humerus fits right into this cup, forming a ball and socket joint. Now, in this diagram, I have a very large hole in the scapula and a relatively smaller humerus ball that fits quite deeply into the hole. So if this were a human shoulder, let's take a look at what would happen. As we look at this animal trying to move their upper arm, if they were to move it, their range of motion would actually be quite small. So if you look at this marker, I'm moving it all the way as far as I can around, and we're not getting a lot of rotation. So like a human arm can move a lot farther than this just little circle that is achieved by this deep scapular cavity and smaller humerus. So this is a shoulder that you might find more in chimps and our ancestors who had less flexible shoulders and were not able to throw as well. The benefit to this is that you have a lot of stability. Like, it's going to take quite a jar to knock this ball out. And I can move it around, I can shake it, I can put big impacts on it, and that ball's not going to come out. The cup falls over, but the ball's still in the cup. Now we're going to look at a different example that's more like humans and see the differences. Now this shoulder is more similar to that we would see in a human. So the scapula cavity, this cup, is a lot smaller while we have the same humerus. So the humerus, compared to our last example, is a lot bigger than the scapula cavity. And as a result, it's not going to get far in. It's going to be very shallow in this cavity. So now as we move our shoulder, we get this huge amount of rotation, like a human can when they throw a baseball or do arm circles. You see them get a full 360 rotation, which we can see in this example. So this makes it easy to throw, and it's how humans can throw better than other animals. But the catch is that we have far less stability. Any small impact is going to knock this ball straight out of the cup. And even if you make exaggerated arm movements, the ball can come right out. And that's a dislocated shoulder. Which, obviously, if you dislocate your shoulder, then you can't use it. So now this decreased stability with the increased flexibility is just the trade-offs that evolution has given humans. So now we can throw, but our shoulders are much more fragile. Now, if we had no protection, like in this example, our shoulders would be dislocated way too easily to practically throw. So we have a protection called your rotator cuff that I'll be adding to this diagram. Now this is a representation of your shoulder with the rotator cuff. So this red band around our previous diagram is the rotator cuff, and it's holding your shoulder in place. So as you can see, I can still move it around. It still has a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, it's not going to get knocked out because the rotator cuff's holding it in place. Now, your rotator cuff does a really good job at stabilizing your shoulder, but it is a group of very small muscles. So these small muscles can get fatigued and tired really easily, and when this happens, they become weaker and weaker, and they can eventually tear, which has kind of started to happen here. So as this moves around, this band, which is our rotator cuff, gets weak, and now all of a sudden it's torn and it's no longer doing its job. Now our shoulder can just pop out. So this is what happens when a pitcher throws too many pitches and all the stress is placed on their rotator cuff. Now, a torn rotator cuff can be a devastating injury to pitchers. Sometimes it can be healed without surgery, but it will take months of difficult and oftentimes painful physical therapy. And that will mean loss of action on the field as you are recovering. Sometimes a surgery is required to heal a torn rotator cuff. The surgeons will take the muscles and put them back in their proper place, and then wait and let the muscles heal. A torn rotator cuff will typically take 6 to 12 months in order for the muscles to heal themselves and re-strengthen, and it requires physical therapy and strengthening of your rotator cuff to get back to your strong enough rotator cuff to hold your shoulder. Now, if you try to rush coming back from a rotator cuff, or if your rotator cuff isn't completely strong enough yet when you start pitching again, it could mean a setback and you could completely start over with your rotator cuff rehabilitation. So this is an injury not to be taken lightly, and you need to really take care of your rotator cuff. And to learn some strengthening exercises that will help strengthen your rotator cuff, make it so they don't get injured as easily, you can watch my later video about stretching and strengthening, which will teach you how to strengthen your rotator cuff so it does not get injured.